although we said women are the backbone of African agriculture, and that's 100% true, a lot of the farms that they still run are very smallholder subsistence farms. And the difference between those farms and the big commercial ones is having the money to buy that equipment, to buy that technology, to buy the modern green technology that we're also excited about. And the thing about that is, a lot of the attempts to fix those problems have been run by, companies and corporations who want to help out the communities and all of those kinds of things, which is lovely, but the problem is that they're often not continuous and they're not sustainably run because they're just PR stunts. So they're not done properly.
To add on to what Laura is saying, it's like these companies do these projects, as you say, as like PR stunts, because I've seen it in my community where we're like, we're going to give you the space, we're going to give you all the seeds that you need in order to start planting and everything. But it's not impactful, and they don't go back to check, how is it going? What other kind of support do you need? So it's like they're just doing it for the cameras and nothing else. Very concerning.
So I think one of the challenges that also comes through is the challenge of women not also having enough financial resources to back their businesses, as well as compete with the large commercial farms. But one thing for me that I think is really important, which we haven't touched on, is education. How is our current system of education also empowering young people, not just young girls, young people to go into agriculture? In this week's episode of the That's What She Said podcast, we're going to be talking about from seeds to success, innovative ways in agriculture on the continent, young women taking the lead in agriculture, as well as new innovative ways to fight food insecurity and empower young women to go into agriculture through entrepreneurship, new innovative ways of farming, as well as upscaling agriculture in rural communities. In today's episode, I'm joined by two young women who are quite interested in agriculture. One who is in high school and is contemplating whether to go into agriculture as a career or not, and one who is in varsity and comes from a mining town, whereby it would be really interesting to find out about how agriculture is affected in a mining town. I'll allow my guests to introduce themselves.
Hi Zulaikha, and thank you for having me. So my name is Hope Matibela, and as you've said, I've come from a mining town. I'm originally from Mpumalanga, and I'm in Joburg because of school, basically.
What are you studying?
Well, I'm currently studying a Bachelor of Arts in Strategic Communications, majoring in Strategic Communications and Journalism, which is an interesting field. I'm interested in it, but I would say Hope is really rooted in her background and where she comes from. That's very important to me.
Thank you so much, Hope.
My name is Laura. I'm 16 years old, and I'm really passionate about finding out how science can be used to help people. And I think agriculture plays a massive role in that and in getting people what they actually need. So I'm super excited to be here today.
Thank you so much. Ladies, tell me, when you think of reimagining agriculture, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of reimagining agriculture? Not just on the continent, but particularly in our country, and looking at the challenges that our country, South Africa, is facing. And maybe just also tell me a bit about your background and where you're from. What do you think of if you have been asked to reimagine agriculture?
Interesting. Very interesting. But when I think of reimagining agriculture, I think the first thing that comes to mind to me is technological advances. Like, we cannot deny the fact that our world is slowly moving towards technology. The fourth industrial revolution is taking its peak. And so technological, agricultural, sustainable agricultural practices, to me, that's what I think about technology and how these technological advancements are currently taking center stage. Because there's this article that I once read that spoke about how now there is an app where farmers have established an app called Hello Tracker that allows them to connect with small-scale farmers. That is uplifting on its own, because small-scale farmers can actually be in contact and hire agricultural machinery in order to do that. But not only that, but the use of drones, to optimize the soil erosion, the health of the crops, and all at a global scale. So it's very interesting. So I think technology for me.
That's a really big one, especially in the direction we're moving in altogether.
Absolutely.
Laura, what comes to mind when you think of reimagining agriculture?
To be so honest, what comes to mind is letting women run the show, because I think that just always goes better. But more specifically, what comes to mind is an article I was reading the other day. It's about this incredible woman. Her name is Andile Matsukana, and she lives in Tshwane CBD. And what she started is a rooftop farm just in the place that she lives, which I think is so incredibly cool. And the very interesting thing about it is that she also managed to make it completely soilless. So I think when we talk about a lot of the problems that face agriculture today, it's not having enough space, and she managed to fix that. She's literally built a farm on her roof. Or when we're talking about, soil being worn out and not being able to use it anymore, she found a way to farm without that, and in doing so, to use so much less water. I think when we put women in charge and we give them the opportunity to showcase the things that they know, it's really going to go brilliantly.
Those are both such important points, technology as well as allowing women to be at the forefront and take the charge in leading agriculture. I believe that women have always been at the forefront of agriculture and have been at the backbone of agriculture in the continent. Women have always been the ones that understand the land, that work the land, that farm to feed families. And so I would say reimagining agriculture on the continent has to begin with a land ownership movement for women to own land, because I believe one of the biggest challenges which women are facing, especially in our country where we also have a land ownership movement, is women need to have title deeds. And that's one of the first key steps into empowering a woman to start a business in agriculture, is her having a title deed and owning the land that she's going to use. And so there's so many barriers as well when we think about agriculture and we think about bringing young women, the new generation of young women, into agriculture so that women continue to take the charge in leading in agriculture on the continent. There's so many barriers in terms of holding women back and red tape that doesn't allow women to move forward. What would you both say are innovative ways we could rethink moving around those barriers? Barriers around technology, barriers around land ownership, barriers around even education and bringing more young women in. How would you even begin to just say we can move through those barriers? Laura, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. So just to add on to what you were saying about land ownership, it's very interesting actually. You're very right. Currently about 70 to 80% of Africa's agricultural output is entirely run by women, which is incredible. But in most countries, they only own 10% of the land, sometimes even 1% in a couple countries, which not only is it incredibly unfair, I'm sure we can all agree, but the problem with that specifically is that I think it's very demotivating to women, because you can be an incredible farmer and you can have so many cool ideas, but if you don't have the land to implement those ideas, and the only way you can access that land is through a husband or a male relative, then you can't progress as much as you would like to. And that's very much a difficult problem to overcome, because it's almost a catch-22. Under the current system, you can only get land if you have enough money, but it's difficult to get enough money if you don't have a successful big farm. So I think the biggest way that we can start to move past that is really uplifting women and helping them build successful enough farms to be able to buy more land, and also advocacy to hopefully in the long term change the system and the way that it works.
That's very interesting to actually hear Laura talk about the land issue. It is actually a big issue, even for someone like me who comes from a mining area whereby the mines are dominating all the spaces and women don't have little to none in terms of land ownership. But other than that, they're just bigger barriers that I feel need to be addressed in an area like that, because there's the issue of environmental degradation, whereby now the land is unable is no longer useful for farming in actual reality. So there's issues of pollution in terms of the water pollution, and these mining practices can actually lead to even water scarcity, or should I say water shedding, because we suffer a lot from that, So if the water is polluted, how do you even go about planting or harvesting your plants or your greens in that manner. So that is a big issue of concern, and not to even mention the health risk. So these mining practices contribute to a lot of health risks because we are constantly exposed to chemicals in the area that will generally affect young women's health, and being unable to practice labor intensive agricultural practices in a way because their health is normally affected. But in the conversation of sustainable agriculture and all of that, I feel like there is a glimpse of hope in terms of how the area can actually benefit from using sustainable agricultural practices like your hydroponics. You know what I'm saying? In terms of we're crying about space, we say we do not have space, but as Laura has mentioned, the planting at the rooftop, it's the same way as people in the township planting at their backyards, or making use of vertical farming, using little to none soil, because obviously the soil is no longer useful after the mining practices. So the community can actually benefit from sustainable agricultural practices in that way. So I do believe that there's still hope for even an area like that in terms of agriculture.
I want to bring it back home to you particularly, Hope. There's a woman in your community that is popularly known in your community for the work she's doing in agriculture, and she's been farming for quite some time, vegetables and fruits, if I'm not mistaken, and she uses this to build an income for herself and sustain her family at large. So I wanted to just also find out from you, what would be the starting point for women in your community to bridge the gap between some of the challenges they're facing but bringing them in at the same time?
I feel like the fact that she has even taken the initiative, to me, says we are a step closer to where we want to be. She has started this thing on her own and is making an income out of it. But since we are on the talk of sustainable agriculture, I feel like it's important for us to have conversations like this in order to inform her so that she can know other ways in which she can actually advance and move into the sustainable agriculture part. By there's little space, there's close to none, but she can actually use vertical farming, maybe something she's not aware of because she's not currently practicing it. So it's conversations like this that actually get people to step out and do better.
Definitely. I think another problem that a lot of people and specifically women in Africa face is having access to finance. Because although we said women are the backbone of African agriculture, and that's 100% true, a lot of the farms that they still run are very smallholder subsistence farms. And the difference between those farms and the big commercial ones that we always see making the headlines and being so successful is having the money to buy that equipment, to buy that technology, to buy the modern green technology that we're also excited about. And not having that money is often what keeps them in such small positions and keeps them from doing the innovation that everybody would like to see within the agricultural sphere. And the thing about that is, a lot of the attempts to fix those problems have been run by, companies and corporations who want to help out the communities and all of those kinds of things, which is lovely, but the problem is that they're often not continuous and they're not sustainably run because they're just PR stunts. So they're not done properly. So I think when we're trying to address the issues of women in agriculture and being able to access finance, we have to make sure we're providing long-term support so that we can actually build them up into the large and successful commercial farms that we all want to see more women running.
Like, to add on to what Laura is saying, it's like these companies do these projects, as you say, as like PR stunts, because I've seen it in my community where we're like, we're going to give you the space, we're going to give you all the seeds that you need in order to start planting and everything. But it's not impactful, and they don't go back to check, how is it going? What other kind of support do you need? So it's like they're just doing it for the cameras and nothing else. It's very concerning.
So I think one of the challenges that also comes through is the challenge of women not also having enough financial resources to back their businesses, as well as compete with the large commercial farms. But one thing for me that I think is really important, which we haven't touched on, is education. How is our current system of education also empowering young people, not just young girls, young people to go into agriculture? And what what involvement of agriculture is in our education system in order for us to also learn about how we can curb food insecurity, because that's another challenge we're facing. Yet we've got so many people in agriculture, whether be it to just sustain themselves or large commercial farms. But we have so many people in agriculture. We're a continent of farming, yet we're a continent that also suffers from food insecurity. And there isn't enough education around that. Laura, you're still in high school. Can you tell us if agriculture is a subject within the education system and how you think it could be included? Because even if it is a subject, I'm sure it's not offered across all schools.
Yes, absolutely. So as far as I'm aware, the agriculture is a optional subject in like some GDE schools and public schools, but it's not in mine, and it's definitely not in most schools. And so the largest extent that agriculture is covered within the school curriculum is that it's just touched on in subjects like geography, where we're talking about the environment, but it's not covered enough in depth for us to be producing women coming out of high school that know what the field looks like and know what they need to do to make a difference. And not only do I think that's bad because obviously we don't know enough in order to be making a difference, but I also think it's just something that a lot of people my age aren't even considering as a career because they don't know about it and because it's not glamorized as much as the other careers. You know, everybody wants to be a doctor, an engineer, all of those kinds of things. So I definitely think the education system isn't doing enough of a good job to get people from high school into agriculture, and that's the gap that we need to bridge.
Absolutely. Hope, what's your take on agriculture in education, and how do we actually even, because in our higher education system in university, there's an entire faculty that focuses on agriculture, but it's not shared enough and there's not enough information. So you have a very small group of people who even choose to study any of those degrees within that faculty. How can we bridge the gap in getting more young people to go into that faculty?
I feel like the emphasis goes back to the high schools. It goes back to the curriculum, the syllabus, whatever it is that is being taught. Let the emphasis be there, because from my personal experience, I never knew agriculture was a subject until, I don't know, I got to varsity, you know, because I've never been exposed to schools that teach agriculture. I don't know of any, even when I'm sitting right here. So it is very concerning, and to say, our government, the education system needs to look into it and place more emphasis on it so that when these young people come out to university spaces, they're actually aware of such things.
Absolutely. We definitely need a totally new change within our country and the continent at large, but at least if we can start in our country, many other countries in the SADC region and then moving up to the east and the west and the north will follow in us prioritizing agriculture and the importance of agriculture, especially to curb food insecurity, because it cannot be that we're a continent of farming, yet we're a continent that is hungry as well. So one of the things that I think is also really important is young women. And also once we bring in young people as well as women into agriculture, how do we ensure that we sustain their place in agriculture and we ensure that their businesses are supported and that they're supported and empowered as well? Because there's so many women that we could talk about that have started farming but later eventually drop out of what they've started because they aren't getting the necessary support, whether be it financial backing, whether be it support in terms of educational resources in how to better the ways that they're currently using. How do you guys think that we could curb that?
I think obviously there are lots of problems that need to be solved. But if I were to pick one, I think mentorship is such a big problem, and the lack thereof that so many women face. Because agriculture is a difficult sphere, but particularly as a woman, I think although a lot of women do a lot of the work, they aren't given a lot of the credit. And so when you come into the space, particularly as a young woman, nobody's going to take you seriously. And the ideas that you have, as cool as they may be, aren't taken all of the way. And so having a mentor that's able to say, you know, this is how you overcome those kinds of situations. This is how you deal with difficult people. These are the tips and tricks of the industry, you know, and it's okay. You can hang in there. I know it's difficult now, but you'll be able to make it. I believe in you. I think that kind of narrative to women is something that's so lacking, and particularly in this industry.
Absolutely. That's very true. I share the same sentiments with Laura, because if I don't see anyone doing, if nobody comes to me and say, hey, you're doing great, or this is how you're supposed to do it, it's very easy to give up on it. So mentorship is a very important aspect, but also how I would want like government to actually take part in this, in terms of having the young women that are already in the space of agriculture, have them advocate for policies, you know, have policies change the issue of land rights, let them be the ones to advocate and say, hey, this is what we want, this is what we need in order to be productive in the space. And already the women that are in there in the space of agriculture, I feel like it's very important for them to also put an emphasis on practicing sustainable agricultural practices and move with the world the way that we're moving. So yeah.
No, I agree. I agree with you both, actually. And I think also one of the ways that we could better support women in the space of agriculture, not just only through mentorship as well as government supporting the initiatives taken by women on their own, is I think that we definitely need support from the private sector to support women in advancing their ways into more innovative tech-supported ways, and bringing on tech companies to come and support women with a lot of the new innovative ways that the world is moving in terms of agriculture, with drones, and supporting women to upscale their farms using tech. And I think that supporting leg needs to come from the private sector. Ladies, there's so many women on the continent that are not just in agriculture to sustain themselves, but are taking charge and leading the agriculture movement on the continent in terms of also empowering other women around them. Let's chat to a woman from Kenya who is doing amazing work in agriculture within her community, and is also empowering other women who are in farming as well. That's what she said. You know, ladies, instead of us just talking about women in agriculture, we actually have a guest on the line who is actually doing the work in ensuring that women in agriculture on the continent are empowered and are engaged and supported whilst they're engaging in agriculture. Her name is Wangari. She is known as Farmer on Fire. She started a business after being retrenched, and she's empowering so many women in her community. Shall we chat to Wangari?
Please.
Absolutely.
Hi, Wangari. It's Zulaikha speaking.
Hi,
Wangari.
Letha. Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for joining us. I'm joined by two ladies who are quite interested in your journey. I'll allow them to introduce themselves.
Hi, Wangari. This is Hope Mativela, and on the conversation that we're having about agriculture, it's such a pleasure to be having this conversation with you, honestly.
Hello, my name is Laura, and I'm 16, and I'm really interested in agriculture and science, so I'm so honored to be here.
I think one of the first things I'm really interested in is tell us a bit about your background and what really sparked you to have an interest in agriculture.
Yeah, so I don't think I really plan to be a farmer or an agribusiness person. I just grew up in the rural areas, and basically everyone there is a farmer. So I grew up watching other people farm. My mom was a farmer, my grandmother was a farmer, but apparently when I finished high school, I just told my dad, I want to go to campus in the city, and I moved, and I never thought of farming as a career. But then when I came into the city, I got, reading, I graduated, got my office job. Life was good, And then suddenly the company went down, and so I was retrenched, and I found myself without a job. And so I was like, what do I have? I not only not have a salary, I have zero income, but I also have a negative, because at the time I had taken a loan from a commercial bank. So I was really doing bad financially. So I was like, what can I tap into? And then I remembered, whoa, I know my mom and my grandma and make it, so that it's not a very sad and depressing thing. Because generally agriculture is seen as something for people who failed in life. So I didn't want it to come with that connotation. So I was like, I'm going to put in social media in that. I'm going to show people this is what I was up to today. This is what I grew. These are the seeds we sowed last week. And I kind of made it fun. And apparently it was just a survivor tactic for me to how I got into agriculture, and I've never looked back since.
That's really interesting. And touching on the fact that you mentioned having been retrenched, I'm further interested to know, how did the pandemic in 2020 affect agriculture, and how did it affect you particularly in 2020? Was there an effect that it had on the income you were generating from agriculture, or did it affect the community as a whole?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because the pandemic happened in 2020 and a lot of people lost their jobs then. However, I had lost my job in 2017. So by then I had really, gotten warmed up, gotten to understand the industry and what is expected, and convenience towards making sure the products get to the client. That was the most important goal of any business. Is how are you getting the product to the client. So having this and the pandemic coming, and remember, the one thing that COVID taught us is to appreciate our farmers. We cannot live without food. We can live without shelter. We can live without clothing. We can live without our jobs. We can live without going to school. But at least one thing we all agreed, 8 billion people, is that we need food and we cannot live without that. And so, however, now it became the extra effort of working very hard to make sure that we are feeding our community. We are taking essential services seriously. We were allowed to move around. Cessation of movement didn't affect us. And so for us, we started creating this vegetable basket, horticultural baskets, where we could be able to do door-to-door delivery. And that really is how our business kind of blew up during the COVID. So for us, it was a good thing.
I think it's really interesting that a business would blow up, and it once again shows the importance of agriculture, since it contributes to the food that we eat and how we sustain ourselves and preventing food insecurity. My guests also have questions for you. I'm going to hand over to Laura, who's quite interested in finding out about the impact that you have had on women in your community.
Absolutely. I think it's so cool how you're able to build such a powerful movement starting almost from scratch. If I'm not mistaken, you've done a lot of work to start online classes for other women in your area to empower them. So I was just wondering how you went about that and, what kind of impact it's had.
So for me, it wasn't that I was even very intentional. I obviously was at a very low point when I lost my job. I was actually depressed and I was sad and I couldn't get out of that hole, and I was feeling stuck because I have so many capacities. I have a master's degree. I have so many resources, but I couldn't know what to do with it. So for me, I was just like feeling very aggravated with myself that I couldn't turn whatever I had as an opportunity to something. And I know a lot of women are caught up in this, where they're feeling stuck. They have so many domestic chores. They have to take care of their kids. They have to operate within their households, but then they wish they would be able to make money. And sometimes money means commuting away from the household, leaving their children and domestic chores, and they don't want to have that conflict. And for me, why I do this and encourage them to come into the business of something like mushroom farming or other forms of like chicken commercial farming, which can be done in their backyards or a rental unit just next to where they are. For me, I think of it because I was that person. Those are my pain points, and I want to reach out to those women who are feeling like that. Additionally, how I got even the global accreditation as a global farmer for someone who thinks about food security. I live in a place that is very arid in Kenya, and only pastoralists live here. They just have livestock. They don't do anything else. And so when the drought hit early last year, things were so bad, the cows would die at the back of our house. So for me, I was just looking at it like, wow, these are women with their kids who are going through a hard time and they didn't prepare for it because they depend on cattle. And at least I have that option of diversification. I can show them one or two things to survive this climate change.
So I think it's very admirable how your heart is to help other people and not just to uplift yourself. What I was wondering was, I know you said you didn't originally want to go into agriculture and you just ended up there through a long journey. What would you say to people who are my age and just now deciding what careers they want to go into? Do you think it's a worthwhile thing to go into agriculture? What would you say?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I the problem with our community is that we see agriculture as backward and dirty, as it's been designed so badly, and we need to do rebranding, and that's what if I'm on fire. Even when you look at my profile pictures, I go all out. I want to rebrand how a farmer looks. I go to all these NGO invets and I tell them, you are doing wrong by putting those dirty looking people in their websites saying that these are the people producing food in Africa. How will the young people be attracted to that? The next billionaires in Africa will be in agriculture because the whole world expects us to produce food for them. We have a young generation, we have arable land. We are expected to show up, and it is our responsibility to actually do that, and the world will remunerate us. We can be able to make that kind of money that we desire. There's so much dignity, and that's what we try to bring, the image of there's dignity in farming. So people who are looking at farming and thinking, I'm not sure, I'm too young, I'm not sure, I can tell it to you. The quickest way to make money is in agriculture because it's a low entry industry.
Since you've started Farmer on Fire, how do you think technology and social media has changed the face of agriculture generally since you started?
Agriculture is a business just like any other. It will take as long 3 to 5 years, just like any other business. It will have the same challenges because we see a lot of people being very harsh with agribusiness. Oh, I did this and it was premium tiers. It's a business just like any other if you give it enough respect, if you give it. And one of the ways that businesses forget is that marketing is really critical. And how you can leverage that, even with a low budget, is through social media. Expose people to what you're doing. Yes, a lot of people will feel, oh, if I share what I'm doing, a lot of people are gonna copy my ideas and steal my. No, there is no one else who can do it the way you're doing it. And so don't worry about sharing. Let people know that, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, but I just seeded some few spinach seeds at the back of my house. I don't know what's gonna happen, but just share. People love storytelling. People love belonging to a brand. And taking that brand seriously is through using social media to enlighten other people that, oh, don't just sit there. I mean, you can do this. And after a little bit of time, this is what is going to happen. The biggest transformation that we see on social media is on things like makeup, because there is a transformation before and after, and so is agriculture, which makes it a very magical way, social media content.
Thank you so much for joining us, Wangari. One word, just one word to describe women in agriculture. Only one.
They're needed. That's the word.
And that's what she said. Women in agriculture are needed. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye. Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hope, how did you feel about the conversation with Wangari? What are your takeaways?
I mean, I feel really empowered, to be honest. That was very interesting. It made me to say, okay, this is what's happening in the world, and agriculture is the place to be. You know, it's possible I can be a woman and still be in the agricultural space. But what I admire the most is how she did not let an obstacle or a stumbling block in her journey stop her from getting her. And if maybe she did not get retrenched, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You know, it has blazed her, has given us a lot of motivation. So that was really inspiring, to say the most.
Laura, what were your takeaways, especially because you are interested in agriculture, but also you haven't decided yet what field or career you may pursue after high school? What were your takeaways from the conversation?
My biggest takeaway from this conversation would probably be what we were saying about how agriculture isn't just one industry. You don't have to be a specific type of person to enter it. And specifically, it isn't unfeminine and it isn't like dirty and all of the kind of things that it's often stereotyped to be. So my perspectives have definitely been changed. In terms of where I see myself, I would probably end up on the more sciencey side of it, trying to develop the greener systems, trying to develop the technology and all of that, because I think wherever you end up along that line, whether you are the farmer or you're developing the technology or you're harvesting the food, all of those roles play such a big and important part in the agricultural system, and all of them play a role in alleviating the poverty and the food hunger that we see in so many parts of Africa.
Hope, where do you see yourself from seed to plate? Where do you see yourself in the future in agriculture?
For me, it has to be on the marketing and sales part of things. As someone who's already in communications, I feel like I would really thrive in that part in terms of coming up with campaigns, digital media strategies to actually attract the youth in terms of seeing these products, modernizing them in a way, you know, putting them out there in the digital space. So I feel like marketing and sales for me would really be the place to be.
I see the vision. I see the vision. And if there's one thing that I've taken away from the conversation with Wangari, is that women are needed. And it's reminded me once again to go back to saying Africa cannot be a continent of farmers and a continent of farming, but Africa is a hungry continent. Agriculture is something that we need to be using as a means to curb food insecurity. And there you have it, folks at home. There can be no success from seeds without women, without young women. And remember to like, share, and comment on this episode. We have so many interesting conversations coming up. So stay tuned across all social media platforms to not miss out on any conversation, because there's so many exciting young women taking part in impactful, exciting conversations. Ladies, could you both give me one word to describe reimagining agriculture? I'll start with you, Laura.
I would have to say powerful.
Hope?
Exciting.
I would say woman. And you know what?
That's what she said.